Have you ever wondered why some infectious diseases, like the common cold, are annoying but relatively benign, while some infectious diseases, like cholera, are much more harmful and deadly? Different diseases are caused by different pathogens, such as bacteria, viruses, and even protists. Pathogens cause disease by the way that they reproduce and live within you. Bacteria divide asexually, meaning that they can reproduce very quickly. They can also acquire new genes that may help them survive by lateral gene transfer. A virus will attach to a host cell and inject its genetic code, which gets replicated with some error, which introduces new mutations and can allow the virus to evolve quickly. Within the cell, the virus makes many new and different viruses. So many that the cell bursts, and the new viruses are released to infect new cells. Cholera is a type of bacteria that reproduces rapidly in the large intestine. It releases a toxin that prevents the large intestine from absorbing water. Instead, the copious amounts of bacteria are flushed from the intestine with the unabsorbed water as diarrhea. The more diarrhea the cholera causes, the more virulent it is. This virulence can be correlated with transmission. Cholera is transmitted through the environment. People with cholera get diarrhea and contaminate the water supply with bacteria. The bacteria can live in unsanitary water supplies until they are ingested by another host. The common cold is usually caused by a rhinovirus, which reproduces in the nose and spreads when we sneeze. Virulence is influenced by the mode of transmission. The more virulent a pathogen is, the more likely it is to incapacitate its host. Very sick people are less mobile, which reduces the chance for direct transmission in diseases like the common cold. Less virulent pathogens aren't going to hurt their hosts as much. The host will be mobile and able to spread the disease. Colds are spread by direct human to human contact, or close proximity through, for example, sneezing. They can also survive for a short time on surfaces such as contaminated doorknobs. So, transmission is dependent on the host being active and interacting with other potential hosts. In this case, virulence that resulted in morbidity would decrease transmission. The virulence of a pathogen is influenced by two opposing forces of selection. The damage that pathogens cause to their host is called virulence. The second is selection for between host transmission. The ease or difficulty of transmission can select for differences in virulence. If you are a pathogen infecting a host, you have two options. You can cause lots of damage to your host, but that virulence comes at a cost because your host will be very sick, and this will reduce your chances of transmission. On the other hand, you can be less virulent, cause less damage, and your host will be able to walk around and increase the probability of transmission to other hosts. So, from the pathogen's perspective, it's all about transmission. Stronger selection for within host competition will often result in the evolution of higher virulence. Stronger selection for transmission will often favor the evolution of pathogens that are less virulent. This is nothing more than natural selection acting on pathogens. Another way pathogens can evolve to be highly virulent and deadly is if they are transmitted in unsanitary water. What can we do to fight these highly evolved and deadly bad guys? Can we use the force of evolution to make pathogens evolve to be less deadly? A natural experiment occurred in 1991 when cholera, a water-transmitted pathogen that causes diarrhea, was introduced to Peru. From Peru, the cholera spread to Ecuador and Chile. In each country, it experienced a very different selection environment. The water systems in Chile were very well maintained and sanitary, while the water in Ecuador was not very well maintained and was very unsanitary. In Peru, there was some sanitary water and some unsanitary. When scientists measured how virulent cholera was in each country 7 years after the introduction, they discovered something extraordinary. In Peru, the virulence stayed about the same, while in Ecuador, the virulence increased. The untreated water had allowed the cholera to spread, and because it was spreading more easily, it could evolve higher virulence. But in Chile, something remarkable happened. Chile had very sanitary water, and there, the cholera evolved to be less virulent. Because the cholera wasn't transmitted from person to person as easily, only the strains that did not harm their hosts too much were able to survive. By lowering transmission, Chile used the force of evolution to select for less deadly strains of cholera. Could we use this in other places? It would be a win-win. Cleaner water and less deadly diseases.